I'm Jaime Levine, Executive Director of Elder Law and Advocacy. Today in the studio, we have an attorney from the Legal Aid Society of San Diego, Shahin Rahimi, who's a tax expert and has been providing tax-related services for many years with the Legal Aid Society. Welcome to our studio, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So I really don't know that much about your background. So can you just give us kind of a little rundown of what led you to become a tax attorney, how long you've been practicing, and what your practice looks like?
Sure, happy to do so. Again, thanks for having me on so we can spread some good information for the public out there in San Diego community. I was born in Iran, and I was lucky enough to then be able to live in Italy for 3 years as an 8-year-old. Lots of folks in Iran were trying to get a better life for their families, and so with the Iran-Iraq War and some other things, they moved out. And my parents were lucky enough to be able to do that. And so we settled in Italy for 3 years. And as a young 8-year-old, I was pretty happy camper for that period of time, playing soccer late at night and getting to enjoy a different culture and food and everything else. And we moved to the States when I was 11 to Northern California. My father's brother lived in South San Jose. And so we settled basically in the Bay Area. My brother and I joke and say we learn English listening to San Francisco Giants games on the radio. So I'm a big baseball guy and love all the teams in the Northern California area. And eventually we moved to Los Angeles and lived there for a couple of years. Kept making our way down south and after LA, San Diego, and then we finally settled in San Diego. So I've been here since about 1990. After moving around a bit, it was nice to kind of settle someplace wonderful like San Diego. And so I went to high school here in Escondido, California, graduate of 1994. And then I started my undergraduate school at UC San Diego, finished my political science degree in 98. And then I finished law school in '02 downtown in California Western School of Law. And then I began my law career soon after that. And I was looking for my dream job, which was to work in the nonprofit sector to help others. And so when a position opened up at Legal Aid in 2007, I applied for a position. And I remember quite distinctly that I did not get the job that I applied for. It was a attorney position part-time to help with the self-help clinics, one of the self-help clinics that we still run at Legal Aid for domestic violence victims. But as I was leaving the office door at Euclid, our office there, the managing attorney, Rebecca, mentioned to me that there was this position also available for the tax clinic. She mentioned that the office did, or that clinic did tax and bankruptcy work, and I had done some bankruptcy work. And so I said, well, I'd love to apply for that. And I always explain that the reason I work at Legal Aid is I wanted to do anything I could at Legal Aid. It didn't matter to me if it was domestic violence work, housing work, tax work. I just wanted to be able to help people and to be able to give back to the community. So that's where I've been since 2007. And so that's kind of how my law career started.
And so you started off, once you started tax work, what were you doing? How did that evolve into the kind of practice that you have now?
Yeah, I also tell the story of how I took tax at Cal Western and dropped it after one day. I was not interested in the machinations of the tax preparation and the different code sections, and so people ask me, well, then how could you do the work at Legal Aid under the tax program? And I referenced the fact that I owe my career at Legal Aid to Jason Turner, who was the attorney that was running the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic before I started there. And Jason, to his credit, saw something in me and decided to stay on and mentor me for about 6 months. He was going to go in his own, and he still does have his own practice in Chula Vista doing tax, bankruptcy, and housing work, some foreclosure work as well. But if he had not stayed on, I would have been really lost at sea. But because of his tutelage and mentorship, I basically got the hang of it. I also tell my law students who come to volunteer for my clinic that you don't really need to be a tax expert. You just have to be a okay and a fan of mathematics. A lot of the work for tax controversy work, tax planning work, is really about the math and about how you can make the numbers make sense. It's very much a black and white area of law. There's laws on the books under the Internal Revenue Code, and then you file a tax return most of the time as an individual and declare your earnings. So as long as you can hang with math, I tell my law students who are going to come and help out, you don't really need to have tax experience or have taken taxation. It certainly helps, but you can sort of hang in there, and that's kind of how I hung in there with the help of Jason and not being terrible at math.
And I want to, what I'm really interested in is the kind of scams you're seeing and where, how the IRS and the Franchise Tax Board deal with those situations and what your options are. But I'd like to get an idea of what your breakdown is in terms of what your work is. So how much of your work is focused on those kinds of issues and what's kind of your day to day?
Sure. As I mentioned before, I run the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic. It is a grant funded by the Taxpayer Advocate Service. TAS is an independent division of the Internal Revenue Service. So, in fact, I work under a contract that flows from the IRS, even though we are at times on the other side of a case against the Internal Revenue Service on behalf of taxpayers. But that Taxpayer Advocate Service department is critical to the Internal Revenue Service. It is really the vital department that handles constituent issues. I think one of the things that people are surprised to find out is that when a constituent like yourself or me want to get something resolved and have a problem with an Internal Revenue Service issue and cannot go to an attorney, they are going to go to their congressperson, and their congressperson, once they hear about this issue, goes directly to the Taxpayer Advocate Service. So that is sort of the big umbrella that the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic is operating under. We are funded to assist taxpayers with three essential things. First is we provide advice and representation to taxpayers who have a controversy. Controversy is just another bigger word to describe a dispute or a problem. Bulk of the work we do is that, advice and representation. Second, we are also mandated to provide education and outreach to the community. One of the aspects of my job that I enjoy a lot is to do that. I'm doing something tomorrow at an elementary school. They have a resource fair, and so I'll be there to try to talk to the parents about their rights as taxpayers, and if they have any issues with the IRS, obviously come to see us. So those are the main two areas that the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic grant requires us to do. Third is a smaller but also important, which is systemic advocacy. If I, as an attorney who runs the LITC, are faced with multiple taxpayers coming to me with the same exact problem, something that seems to be a systemic wide problem, then I will go back and report to the Taxpayer Advocate Service, and they will then get involved as a systemic advocacy issue and try to resolve that. So those are the three things that the LITC is funded to do. We have done that since I've been there in 2007. Some years you have more issues that come up than others in terms of advocacy and representation. Some you have more education and outreach. Some you do have issues with systemic issues. I would say that in the COVID period, we saw a lot of stimulus money problems that were systemic and taxpayers who weren't receiving their checks. That became a big issue. So depending on the period of time and of course, depending on the changes in the law, we are sort of reacting to those things and providing as much assistance as we can. So that's kind of the basic prongs of the LITC. Now, in actual practice, what we do is mostly the advice and rep. Mm-hmm. And so we have taxpayers to come see us. Sometimes we'll meet with them once or twice. We have a consultation. We describe to them their options. And at other times when they come to see us, it's quite clear that they need something more than just advice. And that might be us representing them in an audit. That might be us going to the United States Tax Court, which I was at yesterday, that comes to town 5 or 6 times a year So I still get to dress up and go to court as a lawyer. I'm not just on the phone with the IRS staffers. And so that's basically the scope of the services we provide. It could be anything from a consultation all the way to representation in tax court. And sometimes our cases take a very long time to get resolved. And we'll maybe get into this a little bit, but there are scenarios where taxpayers are engulfed in such a quagmire with respect to identity theft or with audits that occur because of some complicating factor. They take years to fix. And so in those scenarios, we are really a long-term advocate and representative of the taxpayer and trying to resolve their issue.
Wow, actually, I'm learning a lot. I didn't know a lot of that. In terms of the taxpayer advocate, I mean, I don't really know exactly what they do, and I didn't even know that you were funded by them. Are there other services that they provide that you're not providing, or are they pretty much delegating it to?
They're really the problem solvers whenever there are issues that are either long term, have not been resolved. Maybe somebody has asked the IRS to do something and it's taken a year or so to fix. The most obvious example I can relate to is refunds that taxpayers are expecting but get held up for a myriad of reasons. And the taxpayer is really frustrated with not getting that proper refund that they're supposed to get. Again, it could be a number of things. Could be identity theft. Could be a mismatch of the W-2 or the earnings that they've put on the return. In fact, I've got a client right now, or two clients, that are waiting on a $11,000 refund from March of 2025. And it is being held up over a very small W-2 from the wife that is not being corroborated from the IRS's perspective because the employer that she worked for has not submitted the W-2. So she declared this $3,000 of wages for this job she performed, and that refund is being held up. So for that case, while we have tried to resolve it with our own advocacy and sending in forms, communicating with the IRS, we haven't gotten anywhere. So we actually ourselves will go to TAS and will ask the Taxpayer Advocate Service to open a case. They will assign an advocate to the case, and essentially what they're doing is back channeling with whichever department the IRS has that refund frozen and is waiting to get some sort of confirmation about the earnings she had to try to make that process go through faster. And the Taxpayer Advocate Service does that problem solving for a number of different taxpayers who ask for help. Especially, again, they give priority to the congressional folks who are asking for assistance. And there actually has been some recent changes in the law with respect to how TAS operates that is, knock on wood, going to provide a lot more relief. Previously, up until this point since 2007, when you asked for, or when I asked for Taxpayer Advocate Service to get involved, there was no general database, no website, no system that we could go to check on the case. Now, Taxpayer Advocate Service has finally basically broken through and provided that to the congressional staffers, which is terrific as a good start. So if whichever taxpayer asked for assistance, let's say it was Representative Jacobs, and she and her staff are trying to get that resolved. Now they have access to the database with Taxpayer Advocate. They can see, here's the advocate who's assigned to the case. Here's the most recent letter that went out. Here's the most recent update from that taxpayer advocate. And they can update the taxpayer as to what's happening. A lot of times taxpayers are in the dark, and we can certainly talk about the funding cuts that have occurred with the IRS, how much staff has been cut, how many folks have retired, customer service is down. And so those are all real problems that taxpayers face, mine included. So hopefully that's going to be a terrific change. And the idea is now, if this works for the congressional staff, I think it's called Phoenix, the database that has now become available to the congressional folks. There's been some word from our folks at the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic program office out in Washington, D.C., that they will also allow the LITC staff attorneys to have access to that Phoenix database for us to be able to check, which would be great.
Yeah.
We're waiting on word. That would be terrific. I think that would provide us with a lot more efficiency in resolving those cases. They'll get fixed at some point. At some point, there'll be some sort of resolution to it, but I certainly think that these two taxpayers that I'm helping should not wait from February, March of 2025 until sometime in the summer of 2026 to get that refund.
Yeah. For individuals who are facing a tax issue of some kind, would you suggest that they contact their representative or they contact the taxpayer advocate? What's sort of the...
So what I would say is, if they're eligible for services, they should contact us first at the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic. I do believe that we have the ability to solve almost every type of issue that comes up. Again, they have to be eligible for our services. But if they cannot come to us, there's certainly another avenue of relief here. There's another Low Income Taxpayer Clinic at the University of San Diego. They also do good work.
Oh, right.
But certainly Taxpayer Advocate Service would be the next step to go to. We have certainly had clients who come to us seeking assistance, and I would say, 10 to 15% of them, when they come to us, have already asked for TAS help, and they are in some sort of process of getting either the taxpayer advocate who's going to ask them for information or waiting to be assigned a taxpayer advocate. All those different resources should be able to help. If they go to their congressional person, they'll just get assigned to a TAS case anyway. And so those are sort of the ways they can resolve the issue.
Okay. And then one last question before we get into the identity theft and what we were
Sure.
talking about. You had mentioned bankruptcy. So when do you guys get involved with bankruptcy, and what's the...
Yes. So technically, we can, under the LITC, provide assistance and represent someone in a bankruptcy. And in fact, I remember one of the first things I learned when I started at the legal aid office with Jason was that there were some cases that the LITC was referring to our consumer department to do bankruptcies. Since then, the bankruptcy has sort of, in a very good way, has morphed into such a bigger service that we provide that is wholly within the consumer department.
Okay.
Our consumer protection department has, I think maybe 7 to 9 attorneys at one point or another. One of them is Fanny. Fanny has bankruptcy experience in private practice before she came to legal aid, and she now runs our bankruptcy self-help clinic. I should state that that was a really great project that began with Allison Snow, who was one of the attorneys at the office before, along with Judge Margaret Mann. She was instrumental in bringing the bankruptcy court to the partnership with legal aid. We got together. I remember actually myself and Allison had one of the first meetings with Judge Mann in her chambers at the bankruptcy court in downtown about how this would be a great project. The bankruptcy court is looking to provide education to the consumer out there. Legal aid can do that for the bankruptcy court and then partner up and have a self-help clinic. And so I think it's every Wednesday that Fanny and her team run this self-help clinic at the bankruptcy courthouse, providing assistance to people who are coming to get help with bankruptcies. And at times, when the case merits it, I think we also represent the person in the bankruptcy matter if it's something that is within the priorities of the funding that we receive from the bankruptcy court. And so, yeah, we do that as well. Everyone can go to our website at www.lassd.org. We have a myriad of different services we provide, ranging from the tax program to the bankruptcy self-help clinic to the self-help clinics at all the different courthouses. Our website has been much improved now, I have to say. And so we have all sorts of things in there, information about volunteering, information about different things we do, education events. For example, I know one of the consumer protection team members, Ashley, she runs a student debt seminar, I think either once a month or once every couple of weeks. And her role with the legal aid office is just to do student loan stuff. And so she's become such an expert. She has a newsletter that she pumps out internally. And I know she runs this, I think it's virtual, the seminar that she runs, but I know a lot of the internal staff at legal aid, folks that are the advocates or the paralegals or the secretaries or even the lawyers, are using that to get more information and to get better educated about the student loan process.
Her name's Leslie? Is that
Ashley.
what you said? Ashley.
Correct.
Oh, that's great.
I think it's Ashley Naporli is her last name.
Naporli. There was a time when certain student debt could be discharged in bankruptcy. Is that still the case? Is it?
I think it's an ever-evolving situation.
Uh-huh.
Definitely Fannie would be the expert on that front, on the bankruptcy self-help clinic. And I know that for tax purposes, there's very specific rules with that as well. We call it the 240 rule. 3 years due, 2 years filed, and at least 240 days from assessment. So lots of folks come to us for assistance. The reason we no longer do them bankruptcies within the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic is bankruptcy is a very significant legal decision that someone is making. It affects them for the next 7 years at the very least with respect to their credit. And so for us, we have learned that we can usually, if the person is a good candidate for a bankruptcy, we can resolve their tax problem administratively within the IRS's parameters for negotiating down an amount that's owed. And so whenever we have those two roads to take, very often 98, 99% of the time, we're going to look at a administrative way to resolve it instead of doing such a drastic legal maneuver such as a bankruptcy.
Okay. That's a very interesting subject. We could talk a lot about it, but I do want to sort of get to what we wanted to talk about, which was the kinds of scams that you have seen and the evolution of the kinds of issues that have been coming across your work. So you had mentioned identity theft. I think you said that that's where you were seeing a lot of people being targeted. So tell us about that and how it's changing.
Yeah, we are. It is something of a weird mutation that has formed in the last maybe 5 to 10 years. It has to do with technology. There's no doubt about that. The technological advancements have made the stealing and taking of your PII, your private information, private identifying information, the IRS refers to it, your social security number. It has become so prevalent. It has become so common that ID theft cases are now the norm, where they used to be quite rare back in the day. When I started in 2007, out of the 100 cases that we were working on one point or another, maybe we would have 2 or 3 that had some sort of identity theft. And most of the time back then, the identity theft was occurring because of somebody very close to the taxpayer. It was either a relative, it was either a friend, it was a roommate, it was somebody, or sometimes it was related to immigration issues, meaning that somebody was undocumented, wanted to go work somewhere, and was unbeknownst to the family member to over here using his or her social to go and work. And so those are commonplace back then. They were not really anything to do with any technological issues or data breaches. Now, you cannot protect yourself. That's kind of what we've talked about in the last little while when we do our education and outreach. What you have to do is just be super vigilant and aware of what can happen and to be able to react to it. So we have right now, I would say in my office, out of the 96 or 98 cases that we've got ongoing, probably about 11 or 12, some version of identity theft case going on. Again, it could certainly be the familiar family situation. I've got one right now where the taxpayer says that her sister is using her social security number to file under her father's tax return and claim some credits. That happens. But then I also have about 4 or 5 scenarios where my taxpayer is over 60 years old. They are retired, have been receiving Social Security benefits for many, many years, and yet there is some sort of identity theft ongoing. One of them is a taxpayer has stolen her identity and information and has filed a tax return claiming fuel credits, as if that person is a semi-truck driver and drove all around the country and therefore should get fuel credits. And in that scenario, the fuel credit is a refundable credit, and so it can bring back a overpayment or a refund to the person who's filing, because you're not going to file a return and commit fraud and risk criminal prosecution to just say I earned some money and I owe taxes. There's always
Right.
some overpayment or a refund that's at the crux of that issue. So that's one. We have another one where it's through the online internet romantic sort of relationship. This particular taxpayer, again over 60, with some health issues, some mental capacity issues, was deceived into walking into the IRS office in downtown, filing a tax return that claimed over, I think, $300,000 of farm income, but then at the same time tried to claim a withholding credit of about $67,000 and claim a massive refund. And in that scenario where the taxpayer was deceived into doing this nefarious act, what happens to her is the IRS, thankfully, does not provide the overpayment or the refund from that return. But you'd be surprised to find out while they don't allow the $67,000 of credits, under the law, they are required to accept her earnings that she is putting on the return, the $300,000 of income. And so while they take away the credits, now there's a return on the books under her name, under her social, with $300,000 of income. And now she's got a bill in the mail from the IRS saying, pay us 130 grand of taxes.
Oh my God.
And so she's coming to us for assistance. And then lastly, we certainly get the scenario of a person who is unaware that someone else has filed a return and claimed credits on their behalf, especially the earned income tax credit or the child tax credit. And again, that's a smaller amount that's claimed as a refund, but that scenario happens as well. Most oftentimes, that's the case of again, this is a family situation where the father or the mother of a child or two children do not have custody, have not had custody, maybe see the kid once in a while, but are running to the tax office of the IRS and beating the other parent to the punch by filing a return, claiming the child, claiming the credits, and then getting the refund. And after they do that, once my client taxpayer who has custody goes to file a return, her return is rejected. The IRS already has a return on the books with that other child that's been claimed. So that is also kind of what happens in these ID theft cases. And I should sort of put a bow on the problem by explaining, again, this is not a function of the lack of trying to fix these problems. It is the overwhelming number of these cases. The amount of days that it's taking the IRS to process these cases, to process something called a Form 14039, which is an identity theft affidavit, the very form that any taxpayer who has been a victim of identity theft is required to file with the IRS. These 14039s have gotten longer and longer and longer processing times, so much so that in this last month, what I heard from the IRS person on the phone was these are taking more than 533 days to process. And so that's a full year and a half from the moment you submit this paperwork to have it being at least maybe resolved, and you don't even know about that.
Mm-hmm.
What we tell folks to do in terms of protecting themselves and trying to work these cases is as much substantiation of the theft as much as you can provide, the better. So that includes a police report whenever you can get one. Certainly involves the identity theft affidavit with Internal Revenue Service. But we also suggest to them to go to the Federal Trade Commission. FTC has an identity theft affidavit that can be filled out. Those are the three pillars of having yourself protected and being able to, I guess, one way to explain it is to prosecute your case that you are a victim of identity theft, because the IRS is going to get thousands and thousands and thousands of these. It's become so prevalent.
Right. I want to go back to one thing you said, which is it's not enough to be diligent at this point. I just want to clarify that the way that I am interpreting that is you're talking about the hacks that people are kind of we're all victims of. Like I know I've been subject to I don't know, hundreds of
Right.
hacks, and our information is on the dark web,
Right.
and people just buy it.
Right.
And now with AI and all the prevalence of this information that's available, there's no way that we can stop that. That's not, even if we're super careful
Correct.
and we're using our VPNs and our encrypted passwords and everything, the back end of all those websites is the problem.
Yeah, I think it's even the fact that the data breaches are occurring without our knowledge, and sometimes not the malfeasance of the provider. And this is happening in the healthcare field, where Sharp or Kaiser or some other healthcare provider. I'm not picking them on purpose, but I'm just thinking of the big two that I know off the top of my head. They are getting data breaches in their system from somebody coming from the outside to get that PII. And so, as you said, you can't really prevent that. That's not up to you. You're not in their system, and it's a function of that information is got to be available to the healthcare provider. They can't not have it. So, one of the things we talk about is to be able to monitor your data is critical. And one of the things we really, really harp on, I know the consumer protection team that I work alongside with at Legal Aid does this as well, is the federal government allows a credit report to be accessed by every person in the United States from the three credit bureaus, which are Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. These three credit report bureaus essentially are providing the same information. I know they say that they have proprietary technology that they use, but essentially it's the same thing. If I took all three of mine and put them on the table here, they would basically say the same thing. I have this mortgage, I have this car loan, I have this bank account, I have this investment, so forth and so on. What we tell folks to do is, look, since you get a free one once a year, don't get all three at once. Spread them out. Beginning of the year comes, you get one from Experian. 4 months later in May, you get one from Equifax. 4 months later, you get one from TransUnion. This way, you're able for free every 3 or 4 months to see your credit report, to see what is showing up as a debt and as payment on your credit report. Critical to be able to see if there's any malfeasance, if there's anybody who's pretending to be you. Has someone gone to Best Buy and tried to buy a large refrigerator in your name? That's one of the things we kind of tell everybody to try to do as much as they can. But as you said, since it is so difficult to prevent the breach of the data, you just have to be vigilant about being on top of your own credit report and being aware of when you are asked to provide information, who is asking for that information, especially over the internet.
Right.
I was telling my father the other day, who is looking to go on something similar to Facebook to make some friends. And of course, my first warning is, what information are you providing to them? Name is fine, address is okay, phone number is a little sketchy, but apart from that, you shouldn't be giving any other info. No bank account, no social security number, none of that stuff. Yeah. So that's kind of what you got to do.
Right. In terms of monitoring data, you think the website for the free credit report is annualcreditreport.com?
Exactly, yes.
Okay, so
yes.
That's something that people should be aware of. I'm always kind of hesitant to give that out because if you make one mistake,
that's true.
Then maybe there's some scammers out there who's got annual with one N or something.
Yes.
But that is the website.
That's happening. I think I just saw an article a week ago about how folks were getting, speaking of the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS is moved into a digital system, so they are no longer providing paper checks. This is just for this tax year. Right. So if you filed a 2025 tax return and you requested an overpayment or a refund, and you do not have a bank account, some of our clients are unbanked. They don't have access to a credit union or a bank account. They were then, instead of being sent a refund check, were sent a letter from the IRS saying you filed a return, you claimed a refund, please go on our website and register your online bank account so we can send you the money. And if you didn't do that, you'd wait another 6 weeks before getting your refund check. That issue being set aside, what I saw last week was scammers were sending letters that looked identical to that letter from the IRS, supposedly asking someone to click on a link, click on a QR code, and then obviously that was the scam. Try to infiltrate your digital device that you were using. They're getting better and better and better. I don't know how many times I've had folks tell me that the IRS called them and was texting them about something that is going on. And I always go back to the playbook and say, no, unless you're in a tax court proceeding or unless you're working with an appeals officer who is auditing you, IRS only communicates via correspondence. They do that on purpose. They know that an email or a text message could very well come from somebody else pretending to be them. So they do that on not on a whim, but as a function of trying to protect the taxpayers.
But is that sufficient? So you're saying they just send hard copies? They only...
Correct.
Is that sufficient? I mean, people do get scams in the mail.
They do. We try to prevent as much as we can. We ask them to bring the letters to us. We ask them to try to, once we've got a communication via email, we try to make sure we can see what's going on. And in fact, as part of our practice, I always tell every applicant who asks us for assistance, if I email you, never respond with an attachment. Always respond with confirmation that we spoke, that we have some communication already, so that you know that it's me. You have to be vigilant about getting any communication that is not from a trusted source. So that's something we also practice and say, look, if I'm sending you an email, what I want you to do is just confirm that we had a conversation, confirm when we talked, where we talked, when we talked. Then I will ask you for some specific information. And once I've got that thread going and I know that it's you who I spoke with earlier or I met with earlier, then I can ask you some pointed questions about, okay, so what letter did you get? And they'll send me a letter, and sometimes it looks like an IRS letter. Sometimes it looks like it's coming from the state of California, but it's not. You got to be really careful and look to see the icons at the top left, the seals maybe that might be on a letter, and that happens often.
Okay. So what is the protocol? Like if you have a client who fills out this Form 14039,
Yes.
what is the process? I know it's 533 days, but what are they assessing and what are the remedies that IRS and Franchise Tax Board are offering?
They both have an identity theft affidavit. I'm forgetting the form that the state uses. I want to say it's 3520 or something like that. But one of the critical things actually is to be very careful about the timing of the submission of both of those. Here's why. Once the 14039 from the IRS's standpoint is received, what they do in trying to protect you is block access to the wage and income transcript and the account transcript for whatever year you're asking them for relief. And so when someone comes to us, our first question is, have you sent the 14039 yet? And if they say no, we say, good, don't send it in just yet. Let us first access that info. I need to see what's on the records. Those two things I referenced are really important. What the IRS has, so does the state, they have two different sets of records that are indicative for whichever year you are trying to get information for. One is a wage and income transcript. That is the full summary of all third-party records and earnings for that taxpayer. So if it's me from last year, it would have, Legal Aid Society of San Diego. If I worked someplace else, if I did some, Grubhub stuff, if I earned interest at the bank, if I had a 1099 that I got for paying my mortgage or 1098, it would basically list all those items. So the wage and income transcript is available for all taxpayers for the previous 10 years through the IRS website. It's pretty easy once an attorney gets a power of attorney on file, or the taxpayer themselves, if they can verify themselves online, can have access to that wage and income record. That document, that summary of earnings, is the basis for the tax return. And then the account transcript is basically like a story of what happened for that year. So the 2025 transcript will say that it was a 2025 tax year. The return was filed on, April 14th. It declared two individuals. It declared X amount of income. The tax was X, so forth and so on. For that case, that's an identity theft case. We don't want that 14039 in until we can get both of these. Because if someone says, look, I only had Social Security earnings, but the IRS says that they have a tax return, I'll give you this example right now. This woman called me about a week ago. We called her back. She's a teacher. She's getting some benefits from 2 different states because she taught at both states, and she's getting some Social Security. So she has 3 earnings. She says that she was sent a letter by the IRS, no text message or email. She was sent a letter by the IRS saying, yeah, they need to see her in person because there's a concern of identity theft. She went in person, and they said, yeah, we have a return that says you have a, what was it? A cattle farm in Alaska. And you had $300,000 of earnings and requested a large refund. And so for her, what we want to do is, if she had come to us, don't send in the 14039 yet. Let us get the records for those 2 things, a wage and income transcript and an account transcript. The wage and income transcript should show, if she's really saying what happened to her, 3 items: the 2 state retirement for teachers and the Social Security, nothing else. And the account transcript should also help us. When was this return filed? How much was declared on this return? So we always say, wait until we get the records first and then send the 14039 in. The 14039 is just like a 2-page form, but it does have some boxes to be checked. And almost always, you want to attach some information to it. That's why we like those 3 things. You get a police record, you have a ftc.gov, and you have the 14039 itself.
Mm-hmm.
Any other documentation also helps. If, again, you're trying to disprove something that happened, you would basically have maybe your wage and income transcript that you'd send off as well. Say, look, here's the records of what I earned. I did not earn any other income. That other income that's been declared is fraudulent. If the 14039 is going to go in for somebody who we talked about has the mother-father dependent problem, where one of the parents is trying to claim the kid before the other one can, the 14039 should go with a custody order, with school records that show that the school that the child is going to, what address is on that record? Is it the mom's or the father's? Medical records, if the child went to some appointment with the doctor, again, what address shows on there? Those are the things you want to send in with the 14039, albeit knowing it's going to take a very, very long time to resolve.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at times, if the taxpayer is facing some sort of desperate hardship situation, if they're waiting for a refund that hasn't come in and they're about to get evicted, that's when they can go to TAS. The Taxpayer Advocate Service does have a function called a offset bypass refund, an OBR, wherein they can actually take the physical tax return that's been expecting a refund with, of course, some proof of the hardship, the eviction notice, the notice from SDG&E that the lights are going to get shut off, and they can circumvent the IRS's long delay and get that faster to them. But that's really what we want to do with the 14039. Same with the state of California. The state of California is a lot better in handling these. They don't have obviously the same volume that the IRS does. And so we have oftentimes gotten assistance from the state a little bit faster than the feds. It depends on the situation. And it's a real important part here I should remember to tell the people out there. One of the ways you can protect yourself from identity theft with respect to taxes, especially for folks that are a little bit older and are relying on the fact that they're only a Social Security recipient and therefore do not have a requirement to file, we push back and say, no, please file. Because filing protects you by declaring the actual income you have, not allowing the other person to do that. That's a big critical component. I'll give you a really good example is that one, there's a client of mine that I'm helping with both the federal and the state. We think someone near her, like a family member or a friend or a roommate, has used her social in different places. We got the state of California to grant her identity theft for 2020. This has happened maybe 3-4 years ago. State said, fine, we get it. She didn't earn this other income. We'll basically put an indicator for 2020. But the next year, the taxpayer did not file for herself. And it happened again. And by not filing and not responding to notices, the state went ahead and filed for her. State and the feds will do that. That's another reason we tell taxpayers you should file your return. Because if there's somebody out there who does steal your social, who does then go earn money someplace else, you're not going to know. They're going to go and try to file a return, or if they don't even file, the state or the feds will file for them. Huge reason we try to just kind of advocate on behalf of filing returns. It sounds like it's nothing. It sounds like it's not required, but to protect yourself, that's a huge way to do that.
Is that if someone's using your social security number to work,
Right.
is that often fraud, or is that often just someone who doesn't have a social security number trying to figure out a way to work?
That's a good question. It's most likely fraud,
Okay.
unless the employer is the one who is either making it a condition of working there for somebody who's undocumented, who needs a job bad, and says, fine, you can work here, but I'm going to give you a social of somebody who worked here 4 years ago,
I see.
and now you can work here. Yes. So I would say it's both. Most of the time, the person is committing fraud. They're knowingly working under a different social security number. They might not think they're harming anybody, but for sure they are. There is no victimless crime in that spot. And I've definitely seen scenarios where the employer is the one who is pushing the fraudulent activity by the taxpayer, who is, again, desperate to be able to work and earn a living and doesn't have paperwork, and so they're basically between a rock and a hard place. If I want to earn and not be on the street, I got to do what the company says. They're going to give me some other social, and they'll still pay me, and I'm basically kind of in this kind of difficult spot.
So ultimately, the remedy, though, if the Franchise Tax Board or the IRS finds in your favor, then they will reverse whatever.
Correct. What we always say to the person who is the victim of identity theft is to correct the problem is to file an accurate return. So you who's been victimized and you who have a record of wages, sometimes maybe just Social Security benefits, we want to get that return on file with the IRS on the books as the official return. Same with the state, because that'll solve the problem. There's no longer an issue about owing a lot of money. We're trying to do that for that one client who over the internet was deceived into going in person and filing that $300,000 farm tax return. We're trying to get her original return on the books, but we just have to wait till the IRS makes a determination that, yes, she was a victim of identity theft, and then they will accept her original return.
Got it. Okay. I wanted to talk about the pig butchering scams that we're all seeing now. You had mentioned one of the stories that you had seen was related to a romance scam, and that's one form, actually kind of a legacy form of pig butchering. But can you talk about what that is and what you've seen?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's been really interesting to educate a lot of my colleagues at the office about this topic. Yeah, pig butchering is an investment scam where the fraudsters are over time, gaining the confidence and the trust of the victim, sometimes months. And once they're able to do that, they are deceiving them and investing their hard-earned retirement or life savings sometimes into either a fake crypto asset or a fraudulent investment opportunity. The reason the pig butchering term came about is, I think starting in 2019 out of China, with the COVID pandemic starting, everybody was transacting over the internet. Everybody was doing everything virtually. And so the idea of the pig butchering is to fatten the pig up over time to then be able to slaughter it. What's going on now, I think it's a very unfortunate confluence of events, which is the artificial intelligence, the proliferation of internet and device addiction for our population is kind of coming into the vortex of investment scams. And so what's happening is the people that are scamming the victims are utilizing such great technology. They're utilizing such over the internet and online ways to be able to convince somebody. So one of the things I talk about is there's different types of pig butchering. As you mentioned, one of them is certainly the age-old confidence scam, the catfishing, the romance where someone is basically enticing the other person to provide them with money based on some heartfelt emotion and romantic overture. Certainly that happens for sure. What's happening now is two different types, and I describe them as one is the the bullying, intimidating, and scaring of the victim. The other one is the investment sham. So let's do the investment sham first because that has a lot to do with technology. So in the couple of cases that we've seen, the victim is not a person who is easily fooled. One of them actually is a former attorney who got scammed. But what's happening is because of the way technology is advanced, the victim is at first given graphs, tables, pie charts, you name it over the internet or online, describing how they're going to make money. And then on top of it, the victim is asked to invest small amounts at first. Over time, these get a little bit bigger, but they stay small. And of course, every time these small investments return a profit for the person. And so the victim becomes much more confident that this is going to work. And then, of course, the scammer hits and makes this no longer a small amount of investment, but a large amount of investment. And of course, there's the slam dunk right there. That big amount is gone. That's the prevailing one that's happening. You know, I was getting ready for this session and I was looking up, and there are so many state attorney general's offices that have this now as a bullet point on their website. Pig butchering, it's on there, and they're talking about what to do, what forms can it take. So I know it's more common than it has ever been. I obviously have received 3 clients since last March that have come to us, hundreds of thousands of dollars, all gone. So we talked about the ones that are investment shams. It could be crypto, it could be some sort of stock, it could be some other thing that's promised to them. The other one that I thought I had not seen yet, but I've seen now once, I'm going to see them more, is the bullying, intimidating threat one that I had not seen, but it is really genius. I'm not saying that I'm impressed or I'm jealous, but it really is an interesting thing. So this particular case was a older couple who received a call from somebody pretending to be from the DEA in Washington, D.C. They were told that the one spouse's social security number was being used in South America to buy large amounts of drugs. And over some time, the convincing was pretty well done, so much so that he did not say you should give me your money. What he said was, you're in danger. I can protect you. Let me surveil you from DC. Go buy surveillance equipment. And so this couple, fearing for their life, fearing that the cartel or whoever was going to be around the corner, I didn't go into too much detail, but again, this is not it's not an unsophisticated person, did so. And for the next 2.5 to 3 months, what this scammer did was basically lure over them, this couple in North County, San Diego, and make them prisoners in their home. So the idea here wasn't to convince them to give money to make more money. It was to wear them down. The client tells me that she had to ask permission to go to the dentist once. This is the kind of stuff that was happening. So over the course of this 2.5, 3 months, he wore them down so much so that they basically gave up. And that's when he struck and he said, okay, well, not only are you not physically safe, but your money isn't safe. What you should do is you should send it to, like Fort Knox, send it to DC and go turn it from whatever you have into gold and send it to us. And I'll have a courier pick it up. And by this point, he could have asked them to do anything, because at their level of despair, at their level of feeling trapped and tortured, really bullied, they wanted to just get it over with. And so they did what he asked. They went and turned their money into gold. Someone came to pick it up. He said he was going to come to see them for them to go get new social security numbers. And then, of course, his story changed and he decided not to come see them. He told them to go to their bank and get social security numbers. And of course, once they got there, the bank said, what do you mean? We don't provide social security numbers. And according to her, he almost had a heart attack on the spot and very sadly passed away 2 or 3 months later. She says from the shame and the despair. So this is not going to be the first time this happens. I think that both of these avenues of scamming are going to be more and more common, especially for our older community, because the the way that some of the younger folks are able to detect, frankly, BS over the internet is not going to be something that the older population and my father and your elder relatives are going to be able to pick up as quickly. And I think the folks that have some savings, some retirement on that left side, when they're told about that sham investment, it seems too good to be true. And things are so much more expensive these days. Things are so much more out of hand with respect to inflation. That's going to be something they're going to look into, and it might be too tough to pass up. The person that I saw helping now, the former attorney, was this particular one. He was sold a bill of goods on, I think, some crypto information. And so, again, not an unsophisticated person, but the technology is making it so much easier in terms of the ability of the fraudsters to prevail, to get their way, and to gain the confidence of the victims in that
Yeah.
way.
I really think it's a form of psychological warfare. Like they're clearly experts in terms of how they are manipulating people. But I think they're also using AI. Like they are using AI to try to determine what people's buttons are, what will activate a certain person. And as they get into the pig butchering scam, they kind of feel out what are this person's fears, what are they trying to achieve, what do they need romance in their life, do they need security, like what do they need, and then they use that to really hone in on that pig butchering aspect, and they go all in on that. If it's an investment scam, then exactly what you said, like it's a Bernie Madoff situation where
Absolutely.
Bernie gave money back to people for years, and then the whole thing fell apart.
Right.
So I think I mean, we've been really emphasizing education, 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 but the reality is, how do you educate someone about this other than it's going to be so sophisticated and it's going to change so fast that you're not going to know what's happening to you? It's really frightening. I mean, and we're all victims. I mean, we're all potential victims.
Very difficult. Yeah, the one case that I've got, the money that he withdrew from his retirement account, it happened in late December of 2023. And, the IRS's position is, well, certainly you can have a loss count against your investment distribution, especially when it's in this sort of a scam. There's a memorandum that came out in early 2025. We utilized it for our first client. She had about $800,000 she withdrew, and she didn't pay any tax on it. Again, she meets the qualifications. But for him, the timing of it is he took it out in December of 2023, but he didn't hand it over until January of 2024. And per the IRS, you can only take the loss when you actually hand it over to the person who's scamming you. So for the 2023 year, he has a big tax bill. We're going to try to assist him with a negotiation. So from the tax angle of it, it's also going to be interesting how these play. So we're going to see what happens. I'm hoping that there are not any more folks that are victimized, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to see some before it's said and done.
I'm sure. So that's really interesting, this timing aspect. That's kind of a question I have. Like, how rigid is the IRS when it comes to these situations? Do they have discretion, and how high do you have to get in their appeal process? Or I don't know, what is the appeal process?
Yeah, the law is pretty straightforward. This has to be a transaction for profit, which we learned from that memorandum, and thankfully there's no definition of a motive for profit, but some case law has come and said that also could be safeguarding your money. So in that scenario with the gold, I think we should be okay. It's pretty black and white. The gentleman that I talked about who took out his money, again, we go back to that wage and income transcript. Well, for 2023, there is a 1099-R for retirement distribution that says he took out 130 grand from his account. And that distribution has to be put on the return. There's no loss he can take from it because per that memorandum, it's when the money finally gets handed over to the scammer. He's going to be able to take it on the 2024 tax year, but for the 2023 year, he's kind of stuck. So it's going to be pretty difficult. I think the IRS is, for now, happy with its description. And I should say, by the way, that memorandum that lays out these different areas of, the elements of the potential for taking the loss under Section 165, where it's a motive for profit, there has to be some cost basis. It mentions, by the way, this does not cover ransom or romance losses. It's only the investment losses, and it lays out, 5 different taxpayers and what happened to them. So it's a very fine description and a fine category of taxpayers that are going to be affected. There's logic behind it, of course, and so we're going to have to look at each case by case to see what we can do. In the scenario where the gentleman who took out the money and lost it, but there was this timing between 23 and 24, since all the money's gone, we should be able to negotiate with the IRS. When we do a lot of our tax cases that are mostly collection cases, the basis for the negotiation with the IRS is mostly, again, I hate to beat it in a horse, but it's a black and white issue. It's how much can you afford to pay the IRS? Well, if you no longer have $200,000 sitting in your retirement account and there's no money left and you're getting a pension from Social Security, that should be an easy negotiation. So at least we have that as a backdoor sort of solve to fix it if we can't fix it on the return itself. So there's always a silver lining usually with the IRS in terms of trying to negotiate with them. So we'll see what we can do for him.
Okay. And similar process with Franchise Tax Board?
Yes, Franchise Tax Board is a little bit more difficult than the Internal Revenue Service. They have a lot more resources. They have a lot of wiggle room with respect to negotiating because the IRS generally has, like any lawyer would tell you, caveat and depends, they generally have about 10 years to collect from the time they assess taxes. So if they say you owe us for 2025, it's the summer of 26, we have 10 years to collect from you. Within that 10-year period, we'll try as much as we can to collect. You can hopefully pay it as best as you can, but we have that 10-year period. On the state side, that is a 20-year period.
Wow.
And so collection is a lot of wiggle room for the state to say, not so much in the negotiation. And in fact, the negotiation that we do with the IRS is called an offering compromise, an OIC. It's why there's ads on TV and on the radio telling you, hey, do you owe the IRS this, that, and the other? Well, you can come to Blue Man Tax Group or Optima Tax Relief, some of these shysters and charlatans that are trying to take people's money. It doesn't mention that the offering compromise is a solution to your tax problems if you can negotiate it, if you can keep up with some requirements. I've done a lot of OICs since I've been there in 2007 with the IRS. Relatively good success rate, somewhere between 70 and 90%. Again, we don't start them unless we know that it's going to be a good candidate for an offer. That same percentage, though, is almost the opposite on the state side.
Oh, wow.
I think I'm 3 for 11, and the only 3 that I was able to do, one was a 38-year-old blind and deaf taxpayer. One was a person who was living in I had to take a picture of it, I remember, it was a 1985 Winnebago. He lived in El Cajon on $700 of Social Security per month. And the last one, when someone had so much health issues that she had to have multiple surgeries over and over again. Apart from those 3, I've got nowhere with the state. Their response is always the same. We have a long time to collect from the taxpayer. Taxpayer is going to get back on their feet at some point. They can make payments at some point, and so we're not going to do that. So It's kind of a hit or miss with the state, whereas with the feds, it's a lot better opportunity.
Okay. So to win on a hardship claim with the Franchise Tax Board is very difficult.
Difficult, yes. And even if they grant you one, let's say you tell them that you can't make any payment plans, on the IRS side, it's actually pretty easy. You can make a phone call to the IRS and explain that you can't pay, and if you don't owe a lot, they won't ask for substantiation. State of California side, much different case. If you want to ask for a hardship, 3 months of bank statements, 3 months of pay stubs, fill out this form, and then we'll consider it. And if we consider it, maybe we'll give you a 6-month deferral, maybe we'll give you a 1-year deferral. And as soon as those time periods are over, back again into the collection you go. Yes. If someone comes to me at the office and is wondering, who should I deal with first, IRS or the state of California? It's not even a question from our standpoint. State of California first.
Okay. Very interesting. So I think that's kind of the arc of what I wanted to talk about. So, what would the steps be if someone believes that they've been scammed, that they just discovered their romantic partner isn't real, they sent a few $100,000 or something? What are the steps that they have to take at that point?
I would say the first, as we talked about before, is a police report.
Mm-hmm.
They have to start there, make sure that they have a foundation for what's happened to them. It's a crime. Someone has committed something that is a criminal offense against them. I obviously would hope that at some point, if the law enforcement, whether this DA's office or somebody else, could jump in to prosecute that, they would. If not, they could certainly start also with their identity theft affidavit with the Federal Trade Commission. Certainly, if they have a tax issue and they have a distribution that they received, certainly come see us. Like I said, we have a website you can go to, www.lassd.org. We have an intake phone line people can call, 1-877-534-2524. We also do a walk-in session at the law library every last Wednesday of the month. My colleague Travis Dean is always there. Anybody can come in from the street to ask tax questions. We're able to do a consultation on the spot. We have you fill out an application to see if we can do more than just advice. But there's been a number of times when we've just done a consultation on the spot for somebody. And so that's on the last Wednesday of every month. That's at 1105 Front Street. And we do it from 12:30 to about 3 p.m. And then certainly they can walk into our two offices and ask for assistance in person. We have an office in San Marcos, and then we have an office right here in Old Town, 1764 San Diego Avenue, Suite 100. That's where I'm at Monday to Friday. We try to give assistance to as many people that call us, and so we're pretty good at providing relatively quick feedback. We have different language interpreters as well. And so, yeah, we try to help as many people as we can. But like I said, that first step is really to make sure you get your police report in. That's kind of like the beginning foundational act to make sure you can at least protect yourself in that way. And then from there, you kind of go forward.
Okay. And I should also mention ic3.com, which is the FBI's website where you can report those scams as well.
Yes. I think the taxpayer that's having the large amount of issues with gold has an FBI agent on the case. I got the letter that she sent me that says they're on it. I should mention there's also a organization in town called the ID Theft Resource Center. They're a great resource for that kind of thing as well. They are going to provide a lot of information for somebody who's concerned about that. But for tax purposes, if you get anything in the mail from the IRS, or like you said, if you have a large distribution, come see us.
Great. And you've mentioned lassd.org. That's the Legal Aid Association of San Diego's website.
Correct.
Can you say a little more about the services you provide, who's eligible, and also if you have any events coming up?
Sure. Yeah. Before I forget, we do have an event on June 13th, Legal Aid's premier fundraiser. We're excited to have everyone come and join us. It's going to be at the Bahia Resort in Mission Bay. And we try to provide as much fun as possible at those events, even though it's a fundraiser. And so it's our way to give back to the community and a way to get partners involved with our organization. So Legal Aid is a very, serving the bar is what it's called. Legal Aid is a large organization. Many people don't know. We have more than 80 attorneys who practice law in all areas of civil legal practice. So we've got folks that do consumer protection. We do housing, family law, immigration, healthcare access, SSI, tax. So we run the gamut of civil legal procedure. We also have self-help clinics at the courthouses. So we've got folks that help with temporary restraining orders, with DV victims, and those are at all the courthouses in town. So that's North County, East County in El Cajon, South Bay. We have one in Central downtown. Unlawful detainers, of course, as at all those courthouses as well. I know we have a conservatorship clinic in our central courthouse. Lots of opportunities for folks to volunteer as well. We have a dedicated outreach and education team, like I mentioned before. We try to get out in the community and talk about all the work that we do. And Lastly, I know we used to be in Southeast San Diego. Our Euclid office is no longer there. However, at that intersection of Market and Euclid, we have a Live Well Center building that we're going to have our intake person, Javier, is going to be there Tuesdays and Thursdays. So if someone is looking to go get assistance, no longer can they go to our Euclid office. We wanted to make sure we have a presence there in the community. So Tuesdays and Thursdays, basically 9 to 5, he's going to be there. And I've had already one client come as an applicant to see Javier, fill out an application, and then they got put into the system, and we're going to call them this week to see how we can help. So all of our services are free. The folks who are eligible are those who are under the 200% federal poverty guideline. They also have to have some status, whether they're a legal permanent resident or a citizen, or in some flux with respect to status. Maybe they're getting status changed. Maybe they're getting some sort of application as a VAWA victim. And so call us up. We'll let you know if you're eligible for services. And lastly, if you call us up and we do the intake, and either for income purposes or status purposes or the subject area we can't help, we have such a long list of folks that we will refer you to. Sometimes we might be sending you to Elder Law because, look, you're a better candidate for assistance from them than us at Legal Aid. We might send you over to San Diego Volunteer Lawyer Program. We might send you to San Diego County Bar Association Lawyer Referral Program. So we have a lot of different areas of referrals we can provide. And so as long as people can reach out to us, we feel like we can give them help.
Awesome. And I can vouch for Legal Aid's value and the services that you provide. It's really quite incredible. Do you know how many people you serve a year?
I think it's over 14 or 15,000. Yeah. It's a large number.
It's a big number. And as you said, the services are really diverse, excellent quality of help that you provide to people. And I would also encourage anyone who is looking for an organization to support to get involved with the organization, go to the event, and see how they might be able to contribute. And you also, I think, encourage volunteers to help at Legal Aid. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, we actually have a large selection of interns starting on May 26th. We have Justice Corps fellows that come. I have a couple of volunteers from the local law school, and on our website we provide lots of information about different opportunities within Legal Aid. I know we even have some paid internships as well. I know that the Cal Western School of Law provides Anson Leviton fellowships for the consumer team and the health team. I should have mentioned, I totally forgot, we talked about healthcare access. There's a department within Legal Aid called CHICHIA, which is a Consumer Center for Health Education and Advocacy. They do not have any income guidelines, and they are very, very good at getting information and assistance and advice, and sometimes rep to people that are having trouble with healthcare. And so that could be with county medical services, could be with Covered California, could be with their provider. And so you can also reach out to us for that as well. We provide that service.
And CHICHIA helps with Medi-Cal as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Correct.
Yeah. So, amazing organization you work for, and I really appreciate you being here today. It was great to learn about the kind of work you're doing and the kind of scams that we're all having to face. So I think we just have to figure out ways to work together to try to navigate the situation.
I agree. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure, and thank you again for coming in.
Absolutely.